Hello everyone, welcome to TrainHR's live webinar on travel and entertainment, expense reimbursement fraud schemes, and how to defend against them. My name is Ron, and I'm going to be your host for today's session. On behalf of the TrainHR team, I'd like to thank you all for being part of this event. Today's webinar will be presented by Peter Goldman. A few words about Peter before we could start off today's session. Peter Goldman is founder and president of White Collar Crime 101 LLC, the parent company of Fraud-Aware and publisher of the monthly newsletter, White Collar Crime Fighter. Peter has been the publisher and editor of White Collar Crime Fighter for over 12 years and is recognized as a leading expert in the areas of fraud detection, prevention, investigation, and training. He has written numerous articles on practical approaches to fraud prevention and detection for, among others, Internal Auditor, Investors Business Daily, Financial Executives Institute, and Bottom Line Personal, recognizing the vulnerability to fraud posed by a lack of awareness on the part of rank and file employees about specific type of economic crime. Peter launched the development of Fraud-Aware in the year 2001. Peter is a certified fraud examiner, holds a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Michigan, and a Master of Economics from the London School of Economics. He is an active member of Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, the Institute of Internal Auditors, the High-Tech Crime Investigation Association, Infograd, and the Information System Security Association. We are honored to have such a distinguished person such as Peter with us to present today's webinar. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, I'd like to inform you of the program outline for this training session. This webinar is for 90 minutes duration. First, Peter will take you through today's webinar, highlighting the areas that will be covered, and he will then share with you his presentation. We would like to inform all our attendees, once you're part of this teleconference, your phone lines will be placed on mute and would remain so until the Q&A window begins towards the end of the webinar. And I would also request all our attendees to hold back your questions until the Q&A window begins. 10 minutes of your time will be allotted for the Q&A, during which your questions will be answered. And if for any reason you get logged out of this training session or teleconference, please follow the same procedure to join in again. And now that we're all ready to start, I request Peter to take it from you. Peter?
Thank you very much, Ron, and welcome everyone. And I will try to make up for lost time as much as we can and allow for your questions at the end, as Ron promised. To start with, the agenda that I'm going to go through today over the next hour and a quarter or so is we'll start with an introductory overview of fraud as a problem in general, not just travel and entertainment and expense reimbursement fraud, but fraud in general, to give you some broad perspective on just how serious this fraud issue is. And then we'll talk specifically about the types of travel and entertainment and purchasing card fraud. By the way, purchasing card fraud will be covered to a certain degree in this presentation. It's not, obviously, as many of you may already know, specifically a T&E fraud issue. However, it's so closely related, given that it is closely related to the corporate card issue and the fraud problems that are attended with that issue, that we do want to touch on it. We would probably be raising more questions than answering if we did not. So we'll talk about those, and then we'll get into the key issues related to how to recognize and identify actual or potential T&E frauds through the red flags. These are critical clues as to whether fraud is being perpetrated in your organization and leads you to specific tests and techniques and auditing exercises that allow you to detect T&E fraud as it is occurring, or if it has already occurred. And then we'll conclude with an overview summary of the essential anti-fraud controls over T&E and P-card fraud, because that is really what I think you probably want to come away with mostly, is how to prevent. And that's what we'll talk about toward the end before we get to your questions. So without further delay, let me start off with the promised overview of the statistical landscape of fraud in general. Ron mentioned in the introduction the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. Some of you may be familiar with the ACFE. If you're not, it's basically it's a very large organization comprising something like 70,000 members, all individuals who are involved in one way or another in the detection, prevention, and investigation of white-collar crime. They do a lot of research, and their most recent broad research report indicated that fraud costs internationally $3.5 trillion, which represents approximately 5% of gross revenue. And that extrapolates down to the individual organization. The ACFE will tell you, and you can find these statistics in detail at their website, www.acfe.com, that roughly 5% of any individual organization's gross revenue is lost to fraud. So, you know, you can do the math with regard to your own organization and determine what that might be. I mean, some organizations lose less, some lose more, but the average, according to the association, is 5%. A little bit more disturbing is the rate of increase of fraud during times like this, where we have a difficult economic climate. In the 2010-2011 period, according to Kroll, which is probably the world's preeminent fraud investigation firm, fraud increased by a surprising 20% in those 12 months. The reason for that is, in all likelihood, and most will agree, due to the fact that 2010-2011 was the pinnacle of the economic recession, the Great Recession that followed the financial crisis of 2008. And even though these are now, fortunately, we're not seeing 20% increases on an annual basis in fraud anymore, in that the economy has improved substantially from that desperate period, if you will. I use this statistic to illustrate simply that fraud does increase, it does spike during difficult economic times, downturns. The Big Four accounting firm KPMG reported that roughly 3/4 of companies that they surveyed had experienced at least one incident of fraud in the 12-month period under study. Further to the ACFE's research, it's important to note that the average cost for each incident of fraud, and this is all types of fraud, is $160,000. And the next statistic in bold, you can see there, you can see that that this would indicate that travel and expense reimbursement fraud losses per incident are on the sort of low dollar side. $26,000, even though it sounds like a lot of money per incident of T&E fraud, it is an average that the ACFE was able to establish, and it is on the low end of the scale. If you look at 160,000 being the average, the high end, as you might expect, it comes from accounting frauds, Enron type frauds, those types of, and WorldCom type frauds that we were reading about so frequently in the news headlines back in the early 2000s. And those frauds end up costing organizations upwards of several $1 million per incident. So you can get some perspective here on the types of losses we're referring to. And even at $26,000, even if you don't expect or experience a T&E fraud or a P-card fraud that exceeds or approaches that amount, the likelihood that more than one individual is committing T&E fraud is very high in most organizations, and combining the losses does end up in significant losses to be concerned about. The last two statistics take us inside the organization. It should be not very surprising that 67%, according to Kroll, of all corporate frauds are committed by insiders, and that is pertinent to today's presentation in that travel and entertainment and P-card frauds are, well, almost exclusively or overwhelmingly committed by insiders. That certainly is the case with travel and entertainment. With P-card, it's a different story because we have to contend with the risk of hacking and you know, the problem of breaching of information security barriers that have been so widely publicized in recent weeks and months and years, the most recent of which being Target and PayPal and a couple of